Jim Lärimoor. I'm the Chief Officer for Equity and Learning at Riiid Labs, which is an AI and education startup based here in the U.S. That's attached to a parent company in Seoul, South Korea. I will serve as the moderator for the session today, but just want to say maybe a few things to get our conversation underway for today. One is to say thank you to each of you for being here and having an interest in a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, which is trying to figure out ways to make better uses of data and to think about related issues of assessment, measurement, research, and how we have a healthy ecosystem to improve learning outcomes, especially for those students who are at risk of being left out or falling behind. So closing equity gaps is front and center for us. Since we are here in San Diego to launch what we hope will become even more inclusive as a global AI or EdTech AI benchmark initiative, I wanted to start off just by acknowledging that we're in the original tribal homelands of the Kumeyaay tribe from Southern California. They have lived in this area for more than 10,000 years. San Diego has always been a pleasant place for people to live, and it's also a tribal community that has kind of embraced its place in maintaining continuity in the life of their community, and also becoming more and more plugged in to the thinking about an inclusive future. My tribal background is Comanche, so my ancestors would be upset if I did not also greet you by saying Amaralaka. It's your one Comanche word for the day. So we'll go from there. What I wanted to say about this particular initiative, though, is that as we think about the use of AI in education at Riiid, we are reminded in the name of the company, kind of what our purpose is and what our intentions are. Whoops. Oh, thanks, Neil. Which is that the reason why we have three I's in the middle of our name is that YJ, our founder, created the company to remove inequality, inefficiency, and inconsistency from education. And Riiid made a pioneering move last year in making about half of its education data available, publicly accessible. It became very quickly the largest hierarchical, high-quality education data set on the planet. We followed that up by hosting an AI education challenge on Google's Kaggle platform, which, to our surprise, we set out hoping to attract about 1,000 global AI experts. We ended up with about 4,400 people from more than 100 different companies participating in that challenge. And then we followed that with a day-long workshop at the AAAI, the Association for the Advancement of AI conference. And through the course of that work, in collaboration with people you see on this stage, one of the things that we kept hearing was about the need for more cross-sector work, more coalition-based kind of cooperative or collaborative work, so that we can all figure out how to make the best use of the talents and resources that we bring to the table for solving what is basically a human rights issue, access to a quality education. So we're very happy for the opportunity to play a role in launching the benchmark initiative and moving forward together, and we're going to share information with you all today about that initiative, how you can become involved if that's something that would be of interest to you. And with that, I'll turn things over to Dale Allen, who's the president of the DXtera Institute and who has been a consistent encourager, friend, supporter, kind of expert ally in all of this work.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. It's great to be here with all of you. Again, I'm Dale Allen. I'm the president and co-founder of the DXtera Institute. We are a nonprofit consortium of colleges, universities, companies, foundations, and even some ministries of education who are focused on creating open solutions to solve the common and complex problems we face in education. We started out dealing with integration between enterprise systems and applications. That's not an issue still today, I'm sure. We have built a suite of solutions for data management to give all institutions the capability to control all of their data and use it where they want, when they want. And we're constructing next generation education systems with a new student information system that is modular and application based, that's in deployment at Boston College. But we're joining into this initiative and this effort because over the last 2 years, amongst our membership, we have members in 6 different countries. One of the conversations that has emerged is how can we create open data sets or anonymized data sets and open infrastructure to support the training and use of AI-enabled or ML tools. This is not my area of expertise, but what I do know is our membership was keenly aware that they need to find a way to deliver more quality education to all their students. They want to use technology in all sorts of innovative ways, but they were struggling to find tools and or train tools if they were researchers on a large enough data set. So we've been working on those kinds of issues using our open technology and our specifications. And along the way, the same kind of conversation started to emerge. Once we develop these tools, how do we know they're safe, equitable, fair, unbiased? Things that many of you probably deal with a lot more than I do. And so we started to talk about forming a community, which is what we do at DXtera. We mobilize large-scale communities focused on solving a problem and try to bring resources to support that, but through collective action with common or open solutions to be gained. And over the last year, we've been increasingly involved across the international markets, and you'll hear more about that. We're proud at DXtera to offer to manage this community going forward, at least to start and move into a next phase, which again we'll talk more about. But we think it's critically important that as a membership organization, as a nonprofit, that these challenges that we face in the marketplace that don't seem to have anyone else stepping up and solving them, that we can help facilitate collective action to start to address that. So we're glad to be here. I look forward to talking to you more later during the session.
Great. Thanks, Dale. We thought it would also be helpful to put things into context for those who may be newer to this particular issue or who are looking at this coalition or the alliance as something new, to hear from two people who have been working in the field for quite a long time. I think it would set some great examples for the rest of us about thinking more broadly than our own organization or our own company, to think about then what are some of the barriers and challenges that need attention and that can really only be addressed through some kind of collective action. And so maybe if we could turn first to Mark Schneider from the Institute for Education Sciences, and then to our colleague Steve Ritter.
Okay, thank you. So IES is one of the world's largest investors in education research, statistics, and evaluation. And I'm going to pose a problem. Okay, so we are spending more and more money on AI, not surprisingly. I'm not sure if anybody knows what the definition is, but it's sort of like a buzzword and everybody loves it, so we're in that world too. So I'm going to explain a major effort that's going on, and then I'm going to pose a problem. So we are collaborating with the National Science Foundation. We are creating 2 AI institutes. So one of them is going to be on accelerating learning. In part, it was going to be a tutoring, AI-driven tutoring, and we broadened it. So most of our work is no longer be focused on tutoring, but it's going to be much more on accelerated learning. And harnessing AI is one of the things that we are going to do with the National Science Foundation. But here's the other one, right? The other AI institute is going to be on special education students. So, and this is the analogy. So medicine has made enormous strides using AI for diagnosis and treatment plans. Okay, so students with special education needs have to be assessed, diagnosis, and they get IEPs, treatment plans. So if, for example, we look at medicine and say, my God, look what AI has done in the diagnosis and the development and of treatment plans, what could AI do for special education? But here's the question, right? So that's the outline of it. But one of the questions is, many questions flow from that, right? What do we mean by AI? How do we encourage competition between different forms? How do we protect the privacy of students? How do we make sure that these AI systems are actually working? How do we make sure they're better than human beings who are, for decades since the IDEA, have been doing this kind of work? How do we make sure that the treatments that are designed are ethical, fair, right? I mean, we can go through the whole list. So for me, this is a problem. We have to solve this problem. We have to make progress on this. So it's $20 million for that one. Both of these AI institutes are going to be funded at the level of $20 million. And they both pose major challenges. But for me, the special education one is actually the more interesting and the more serious problem generation. So to the extent to which we could work on solving those problems, first of all, identifying all the problems and then solving some of them, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Steve?
Thanks. So Carnegie Learning's been a pioneer in applying AI in education for a long time, over 20 years now. And so we've long struggled with this issue of people thinking that the goal of AI is to replace teachers. And to be honest, I'm sort of a strong AI guy at heart, and probably believed this at some point when we were first starting. But I've really come around to a different view of the role of AI in education. And it came about in part because of a study we did a number of years ago where we were looking at what caused students who were using our software, Mathia, to learn mathematics, to leave the software and ask for help from a human being, right? So we consider that a failure in the software. Students need help. The software is supposed to help them. If they're not getting the help they need, we want to know why that was so we could understand that. And we had the opportunity to team up with Tutor.com, which offers online human tutoring. And in this implementation, students were given Mathia as their primary instructional resource, and Tutor.com as an unlimited free additional resource to use. And so we were able to link these data sets. We were able to look at the students using our software and then leaving our software to go talk to humans. And the question was, why are they doing that? What are they missing from the software? And what are those conversations about? And do they help? And we found kind of three really important things. The first is most of the conversations were along the lines that you might expect, students asking for help with some topic in mathematics and the tutor explaining how to do something. But a significant number of the conversations were what we called affirmations. They were students essentially telling the tutor what they knew, and the tutor just acknowledging to them that they actually understood the mathematics. And that kind of affirmation conversation is exactly like the kind of human interaction that we think that AI may never replace. So that was the first lesson. The second was the tutoring actually worked. So students who took advantage of this tutoring did better than students who didn't take advantage of it. But the third result, in some ways, is the most interesting for this alliance, which is that although in theory access to those human tutors was equitably distributed, in practice it wasn't. In fact, 80% of the students who had this free and effective resource to be able to talk to a teacher whenever they wanted didn't take advantage of it. And 1% of the students took up 40% of the tutoring time, right? So there's an indication that this very expensive but effective and valuable resource of teacher, of humans' time is not being equitably distributed. And I'm sort of embarrassed to say I've been in the business for a long time. It took me a long time to realize that the students who ask for help are not necessarily the students who most need help. So what we did to respond to this was, with funding from IES, built a machine learning algorithm that tried to detect when students are struggling and when the teacher should most intervene with the students. So instead of allowing the students to call the teacher over or expecting the students to call the teacher over, we're notifying the teacher of when they can be most effective in helping individual students and what they can help them with. And at base, what that algorithm does is try and distinguish between what we call productive struggle and unproductive struggle. Students make errors all the time. They learn from making errors. If the student's learning from making errors, you want to let the student go. If the student's flailing, making errors without learning, that's when you really want to call the teacher over. And so that's what the algorithm does. And it's proven to be very effective. If you think about, in terms of bias in education, right, or structural bias, one of the things that I think we really need to focus on is access to this expensive and very effective resource called a caring teacher's time. And so we now think of this problem as an optimization problem. Whereas earlier, the kind of strong AI view maybe is, it's the software's job to teach students, and if the students are struggling with it, they call the teacher over. Now we think of this as more an optimization problem where we have multiple resources, some of which are software, some of which are human beings, and our task is to optimally allocate those resources to students so the students learn best. And what I'm most excited about this alliance, so first of all, this is all bias that takes place that's not about AI or necessarily technology, takes place in classes all the time, right? But if you think AI is going to solve it, you're not paying attention, right? AI is not neutral. AI algorithms are biased based on the people who are building them and the data that they're training on. And so again, I think part of the importance of this alliance is really giving us the ability to be open, transparent, and honest about trying to understand the biases that are in our algorithms. And we're currently working with Ryan Baker at University of Pennsylvania, Nigel Bosch at University of Illinois, to study algorithmic bias within educational software. One of the things that's really exciting about that project is instead of using the kind of standard demographic categories to look at bias, we're asking students to specify their own identity by giving 20 adjectives that describe themselves. And so intersectionality is kind of fundamental to the way we're thinking about how to look for bias in these algorithms. So we're really excited about this work. I'm really excited about the Alliance. And thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Steve. We'll say as a recovering Dean of Student Affairs, I loved hearing your description of the things you're noticing in the data about who uses or who doesn't use an AI tutor, because the same thing happens in real life, right? Yep. I was at Stanford and Dartmouth for many years. More than 80% of the students who used the Academic Support Center were trying to get from a B to an A. The students who were struggling, maybe not passing, at risk of withdrawing, or trying to move from a C to a B, avoided the tutoring center. And a lot of it was just psychological, right? To admit that you needed help, to go from being the person who was tutoring others in high school to being the person who needed a tutor in college. There are so many things that I think we have to get right in order to create the environments that help students really survive and thrive in educational settings. So wonderful to hear the ways that you're thinking about this. I'll put in a shameless plug for a session tomorrow at 2 o'clock or in the afternoon, 10 tips from learning sciences. So if you want to hear more about kind of teacher in the middle strategies around the use of AI and other things, that may be a session of interest. But I want to turn now to another one of our nonprofit collaborators in this, and maybe encourage her to say a little more than she might otherwise say about InnovateEDU, the organization that she leads, and some of the many things that InnovateEDU is up to these days.
Thanks. Well, thank you for being here. Let me start by saying that, because by being in this room, you are also a champion for equity and for doing things differently. And I'm going to really center my remarks around that clarion call that we've heard over the last year on the need to do things differently. If you are coming out of this pandemic or in the middle of it or wherever we are, and you're looking at the data, this is a pandemic of accumulated advantage. The students who are doing all right are relatively still doing all right. The students who weren't doing all right before the pandemic are doing worse, and they're doing far worse. And it is a clarion call for us to figure out not just why, but how do we meet this moment. At InnovateEDU, we think about this through large-scale partnerships. So you might not know InnovateEDU, but you definitely know some of our alliances. Maybe you support K-12 data interoperability, and so you're a Project Unicorn signee. You're one of the over 200 vendors or 600 school districts who have said, K-12 data interoperability is important to me. Or you're someone who supports the work of reaching all students through the Educating All Learners Alliance, students with disabilities in particular. You know one of our 90 partner organizations, from the AFT to CCSSO to COSIN, to folks who are on this stage who are really focused on equitable access to technology. At InnovateEDU, we really believe that big, hairy, audacious problems need uncommon alliances. They need folks to come together, folks that are on this stage, to solve complex challenges. Mark started to allude to some of those challenges when it comes to students with disabilities. I'll say it directly. We do not have technology right now that looks at our most marginalized populations. How we build our algorithms does not think about our English language learners. It does not think about the 1 in 4 students in this country have learning differences. That is a missed opportunity, and it's a challenge we must embrace. And it's these types of multi-stakeholder alliances that bring together folks from Digital Promise to universities of higher education, to IES, to Carnegie, who can challenge and take this on, who can say, let's do this differently. So many of you in this room are already working towards this work. I'm so happy you're here. There's so much more work to get done. And it would be naive of me to say that if we don't come together and lean in this moment, we're gonna have the path that we're currently on in K-12. We're gonna have challenges around privacy and security of student data. We're gonna have challenges on what our algorithms look like, what bias is built into them. We're gonna have challenges around equity and resources. It's not gonna be just us on stage, it's gonna be you too. And so before you walk out of this room today, Dale's gonna tell you how you can get engaged, how you can get involved, and I really hope you will join InnovateEDU in raising your hand to be a champion for equity.
And so we have an actual data scientist with us.
In the flesh.
Mic drop now. So I want to actually, I work, I'm a John Whitmer. I am a senior fellow to IES and am supported through the Schmidt Futures Foundation in that effort, and also advise some of their efforts to incorporate data science and machine learning. And so, Erin, I want to challenge you a little bit on some of the things you just said.
Yeah.
In that I think we are analyzing English language learners. We are looking at, we have an entire center focused around students with disabilities. We have a lot of that work that's actually happening right now, and I think people don't know about it. I think they're not aware of it. They're often not aware of how to do it well. I think Steve also mentioned, and you and I, we've been doing this for a little while, right? And, I tried to have, and when I was at ACT, I tried to have a research question around we should be looking at differences between underserved populations and better served and the mainstream populations in the research we did. And you know what I was told? That's not a research question. That's just basic competent practice. Right? That's what the researchers told me and the people on my team. And we had a very vociferous conversation. I actually lost, right? Just to be clear, and said, okay, it's not a research question. We'll just present the findings every single time that we look at this and we analyze it and that it's a critical issue, right? So those are some of the things I think that we need to have, right? Some of these baseline things that actually are going on. And those are kind of standards that we should be applying for people, and people in this room that are doing that analysis, that are doing that work, that are pushing the envelope, to kind of be recognized, I think, to have that become part of our competency. Again, back to Mark's example, I think about AI malpractice is a metaphor that's resonated for me. If you don't look at bias in your algorithms, you're doing it wrong. Right? You're making a significant technical mistake in what you're doing. So I think that, to me, is part of this effort, is to say, and for you here to think about that. And whether you're, on the side of funding these efforts, you should really be holding people accountable to that, right? Making sure that's present. And if you're representing a technology company, right, you should be looking at that and ensuring that you're operating both ethically as well as looking for these kind of differences, making sure these populations are not overlooked, right? I think those are things we can all do and we can, have as part of our practice, and having a common way to do that, having standards around that, I think really can make our work a lot stronger.
I think that you're right, that IES is making the right investments in the right places, and actually, frankly, is doing some incredibly innovative work. I'm so excited to be a judge of the first Digital Learning X Prize sponsored by IES. But it's not getting to practice, and we have to tackle that challenge. We have to tackle the challenge that if research is done, how is it informing practice? How is it informing the tools that we're selecting? And how is it getting to the learners who need it the most? Because if we look at the results of what we're seeing right now about EdTech usage in this country, particularly during the pandemic, students who are lower resourced, who are L learners, who are students with disabilities do not have access to the same technology, the same type of innovations that students who are in, frankly, white suburban schools are. And if we're not willing to have and wrestle with these hard questions about translating the good research, the good work that actually many of you in the room are doing, then we are missing an opportunity. And that's, I think, where this alliance can come forward and help us get there.
So are you ready for free-for-all?
Go, Mark, go.
Look, so Aaron is absolutely correct, right? And that is that it's what I call everybody calls it the last mile problem. We could do all the research, we can get the work done, right? And then all of a sudden, like, what happens? And, you know, so the issues of scaling up are something that we've been suffering. The failure of scaling up is something that we've been struggling with for a very long time. And so, I mean, I'll give you a very simple example. So when I became the director of IES 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, we required people to talk about their dissemination plans. Okay, so what was a typical dissemination plan? I'm going to publish an article in some ARA journal, right? And that was when we listed like 5 or 6 outlets, dissemination outlets. That was number 1. Okay, and I said, that's stupid, right? I mean, that you know, so you're going to publish an article in a journal that no one will read, and it'll have no impact. So that's like number 5 now on the list. But we really don't have as a field the mechanisms to actually scale up and to disseminate. And we invest about $180 million a year. And scaling up is something that, in education research, and scaling up is something that we just don't know. The field just doesn't know how to do very well. So that's number 1. So I think of IES as an applied science agency, not a basic science agency. And one of our major tasks is the translation issue. So that's number 1. Number 2, the issue of standards is fundamentally important. So we have developed standards in like the Common Education Data Standard, SEDS, okay? And NCS has spent a long time on creating those standards, and they're actually extremely important. But if we're talking about standards for judging AI work, where does that exist, right? So again, we're doing these 2 AI institutes. We're doing the X Prize on digital learning platforms. We're probably going to do another X Prize. We're doing digital transformation research, all of this stuff. We're doing automated scoring, all of which have AI components to it. Again, it's not clear what AI really means, but like we'll call them all AI. But we don't have standards. We don't have standards for judging our investments, right, in any of this stuff. So we think we're doing the right thing, but it's a guess.
So I'll say this panel, the comments that you all have made, I think illustrate for us the reason why we want to try to address this as a collective exercise, right? That what we understand is that as we think about what standards are, or how we defined a concept like security, data security, cybersecurity, student privacy, that should not be done in silos across the field. We shouldn't each have different operational definitions of accountability, or how we explain what data goes into a model, what happens within the model, and then what the outputs mean. So what we really want to do is to focus on creating a healthier, kind of more purposefully put together ecosystem approach where we can get the benefit of thinking across different types of organizations, across different sectors, which we think will help us go faster once we have some of the initial basic things worked out a bit. With this work, we have been thrilled to get such a positive early response from organizations that have expressed to us that they want to be involved, that they want to participate in different ways. I would frame this as a rather unusual question, right? Which is that if you believe that your organization or your company cannot solve the problems of education on your own, then good, because you can't. You can join a bunch of other people who also don't think that they can solve it alone. And together, we might actually have a shot at making more progress than we ever could if we stay in the lanes or in the silos as we currently recognize them. As we think about this, it really does come down for us to think about where do we start. We're thinking about safety in terms of security, privacy issues. I think the ethic, which we'll also borrow from the medical field of first, do no harm. Second, we want to focus on accountability. We have to get to some shared understandings about what responsibilities we have for the work, right? And those are things that should reflect principles and values that we bring to all of this. Issues of fairness. What do we mean when we use a word like equity or ethics? And do we have the same or similar understandings of those things? And then when we look at efficacy, and I'll give Mark a lot of credit for this, in his time at IES, I think there's been an increasing demand for evidence of efficacy. We have in this room, two people who have, with Carnegie Learning and with assessments, produced change and documented the evidence of impact there. And that is unusual in the field, to be able to do that and to be able to do it through random control trials and other really kind of rigorous forms of evaluation. We have to understand what's working, for whom, under what conditions, because all of the students that we're trying to help and the teachers that we're trying to improve support for, they're not all the same, right? So if this work sounds interesting to you and you have a desire to be involved, we would love to engage you in conversation. I think in the remaining time that we have here, maybe I'll point out two things. One is we invited a friend from UNESCO to join us. Apparently it's not an easy time to leave France to come here, but he gave us a statement of support from UNESCO, and Dale may add a little bit of detail to this description. But since some of you represent organizations that have signed on as supporters and who have expressed an interest in being involved in the work, we'll just maybe, I'll pause for 7 seconds if anyone would like to stand or share any comments from their perspective or from the organizations that they're representing before we maybe move into some closing comments up here. Okay, 7 seconds are close enough. so with that, what I would like to do maybe is just turn to Dale to take us through next steps and to think about how you can get involved, how you can get more information about this. Will be available for a few minutes after the session out in the main foyer. So if you have questions there, we can do that. Oh, we have one. Yeah. So if you could introduce yourself.
So we currently have an X Prize in digital learning platforms, and the goal of that X Prize, so people who know me know that I have a bunch of stock phrases that I use all the time. He just stole one of them. What works for whom under what conditions? It's mine. Okay. So I love it when terms like that just become common usage, right? So IES business model is 5 years, $5 million, failure. That's the way we've invested all our money for 20 years now, okay? So the question is how can we speed that up? So the digital learning platforms, the prize is going to go to a company or platform that is able to do experiments, and then most importantly, replications. Because another one of my education science does not have a replication problem, because we don't replicate anything. So we're sorry, as people know, I have more of those. Just push the right button, I'll give you another slogan. So the prize will go to the platform that is open to researchers to run experiments, but more importantly, to replicate them in a minimum of 5 different venues, right? We were within 30 days. So it's fast and faster, right? And the object, and the winner is not going to be based on the effect of their intervention. It's going to be on their ability to actually pivot on the data that comes back from the experiment and then from the replications. So ideally, we were going to do a couple more rounds of this, but there really wasn't enough time within the 18 months that this is going to run. But so no, this is a different X Prize. That's a different X Prize than the one you mentioned. But it's really, So I think the message is, like, if you're going to fail, like, don't take 5 years and $5 million. Fail fast. And then the few things that work, like, test them to ultimately to get to the point of what works for whom under what conditions.
And I would just say it's fail fast and fail forward, right? We're trying to fail forward here and learn from failing. Right.
Which, by the way, is sorry. So inheriting a young and 18-year-old, when I came there, 17-year-old bureaucracy, you would think that it would be nimble and like so I think of my job as scraping away barnacles, right? So that we could be faster and more nimble. And one of the biggest problems, I think we all share this one, is like fail forward. And so I've told my staff, which of course is not true because they're all federal bureaucrats, I said, look, if you don't fail, that means you didn't try hard enough. If you fail the exact same way twice, I'm going to fire you.
So I'll start by saying thank you for coming to Mark's.
Sound bites by Mark Schneider.
Again, when you stand up and ask a question, introduce yourself. I'll repeat back your name. Right. No, sorry. We're thrilled that we have the engaged participants that have already signed on and want to be a part of what we're calling EdSAFE AI Alliance. So thank you for your interest today to learn more. I'll start and I'll end with how to get involved. There's a QR code on the back of your sheet on your chair. Scan it. You can go to the website. It's edsafeai.org, or anything close to that will probably get you there. I think we own all the names. But our interest right now is to engage everyone that's in this market. We want consumers and users of products. We want researchers. We want companies. We want governments. We want the multinationals that convene them to do what they're really good at and bring voice and bring activity and bring expertise to different areas. We'll be managing a process by you and with you. And that's the way DXtera, that's the way InnovateEDU, that's the way IES. That's how we all function, and we are interested in engaging with participants. And so right now we're asking people to join in. Since we sent this original request out, we sent it out to really 130 friends and family of our collective network saying, hey, we've heard from all of you before, and would you think this is a good idea? We got the original responses with engagement since. The deadline for the presentation was, I think, Monday of this week. We've gotten many others. WPI and Neil and Christina and Assessments are here. You see Ryan Baker and his group for Center for Learning for Analytics. There is lots of interest and engagement. We have folks from South Africa, Germany, Spain, Finland, and Israel as of today that have joined in, who all want to do the same thing, which is what DXtera, what we talk about is how can we collectively shift the market to give the users control of the products and the understanding of those products. And EdSAFE AI Alliance is focused on developing those kinds of standards and specifications and certifications that will help us all to answer the question. I just had a colleague from Israel I was having a conversation because I've been trying to raise money for years. And the question banks always ask me is, how do you know if your tool is safe? And he can't answer them because he tells them about the algorithm and the mechanisms and the pieces, and the bankers look at him and go, what? So how can we develop something that is understood and reasonable and shared amongst all of us? And that's the collective goal with what we're announcing today, is that we want to invite you, go to that QR code, go to the website, become engaged. We imagine a roadmap of a quarterly process is our typical format, where we have large engagement, but in the meantime, there are work groups, and you can imagine a work group around every one of those acronym letters, and then sub-work groups that are defined by the population that is there. Governance, communications, research, all of those will start to form organically. But we are not going to come in and set the stage and say, this is exactly the work groups that will happen and this is what will be the outcome. But we have a shared goal, which is that first, engage participants in an ecosystem that is working together to develop something that the users, the consumers, companies, governments, and the market can understand, appreciate, and validate with their selection of products. And with that, I want to say thank you. And I'm 4 seconds over.
So thank you, everyone.